Valentino, for you, it was 27 years, right?
Yeah, 27 years, false imprisonment.
Well, how old was your daughter when you went in?
4 months old.
When you get out, she's a grown woman, right?
Yes. She's when I get out, she's 28.
What do you say to yourself about it right now as you sit there?
Well, I'm a blessed man. Right now, I'm sitting in my car. My daughter's running a restaurant 5 feet away with my grandkids. And, and hold on, and she became a school teacher. So, mine turned out a little different than other people's but I went in at 21, Dr. Phil, and I walked out at 48 years old, and I'm a strong believer in God. So God had a purpose for me. You won't believe this. And I put this in my book. In prison, they used to call me the Black Dr. Phil. Okay, because I had read over 600 books and everybody came to me for advice.
Yeah. You're wearing your hair the right way. I can say that.
Thank you. But I mean, mine would have ended very tragic if I didn't meet someone like Marty, and if I didn't have my art to lean on. I had my art to lean on, and it was the art that got me national attention. Because after all my appeals was denied, 8 witnesses cleared me the crime and a confession from the person responsible, and that wasn't enough. A lot of times authorities, when they make an arrest, they cannot phantom making a mistake, and this is the problem. We're all human here. Everybody makes a mistake sometimes. And when you get the bad apples refuse to admit that they made a mistake, no matter what amount of evidence come before them.
Well, so people understand, August 10th, 91, a late night fight broke out at a gathering outside of Louis' Texas Red Hot restaurant at the intersection of East Delavan and Bailey Avenue in Buffalo, New York. Now, this Toriano Jackson was shot and killed. They got an anonymous tip, and the police arrested you for the murder and for shooting at 3 other people. But it was just 2 days after your arrest that Lamar Scott confessed to the news media that he, in fact, shot and killed Jackson. What happened then?
It's supposed to be a no-brainer. What happened then is they took his statement and they kicked him out of the police station and told him to get his lies straight.
Get his lies straight.
Yeah, they didn't believe him.
I mean, Dr. Phil, I could tell you, essentially what happens is that these law enforcement agencies get institutional blinders. And quite often when they've publicly announced that they've arrested someone, and all of a sudden the real perpetrator comes forward or evidence of someone else comes forward, that the person that they've arrested already, they just continue down the prosecution, right? I mean, if you remember the last time I was on your show, there was a detective who talked about false confessions and how he had never been involved in a wrongful conviction case. And we know where that has led. But we see this so often where law enforcement announces they've arrested somebody and it's kind of the snowball effect. They just try to build this case around that person. And to me, it's what happened in Valentino Dixon's case. I mean, if you've ever heard of a case where somebody 2 days later voluntarily goes to a reporter and says, I did it, I lost control of the gun, it wasn't Valentino Dixon. I know almost every prosecutor, every defense lawyer I've ever spoken to said, that's when you kind of go, time out, stop the ball, let's take a fresh look at this case. And in Valentino's, they didn't.
Well, is this just confirmation bias? Do they just lock in on this and they don't want to see or hear anything else?
I would say absolutely yes, because if you look at a lot of the empirical evidence on wrongful convictions, we've seen so many innocent people go to prison, and later on, when the facts come out, we discover that the law enforcement had evidence that pointed to someone else, not the person that was convicted. And I think it's confirmation bias. I think it's institutional blinders. I think it's also a sense of, if we reveal the truth, what's going to happen to some of our other cases? We'll all of a sudden we open Pandora's box. And, we know with Louis Scarcella, who was on the Dr. Phil show with you, and we see what happened with him in all the cases that he was involved with. So I think that's a perfect example how there's this level of protecting protecting their own mistakes. And when all of a sudden, it's hard to call it a mistake, it's more of an intentional act, that we discover the intentional wrongdoing, the intentional act. It's deeper than just one case.
Well, here's what Scarcella said, and this was in 2007, but here's what he said. I'm Louis Scarcella, and I spent about 29 years in the New York City Police Department. I've investigated 241 murders, and my main objective is to get a confession that would assist the investigation into a conviction. Are there rules when it comes to homicide? No, there are none. I will do whatever I have to do within the law to get a confession or to get someone to cooperate with me. I lie to them. I will use deception. The bad guys don't play by the rules when they kill mom and pop, shoot them in the head, ruin the lives of their family. I don't play by the rules. There are a lot of tactics you can use. I like the emotional tools. I sat down one day and I prayed with an individual. Sometimes I would use a lie. I had a case and I said, I have your prints. You were there and that's it. He says, no way I wasn't there. It was like 4 a.m. I had to take him to the bathroom and he says to me, Louis, you were right. I was there. But he kicked me and I shot him by accident. Don't you feel better now? He's been doing 37 and a half years to life. He said, we're always accused of coercing confessions. I've been accused of brutalizing people. I was accused of taking a 17-year-old boy and banging his head numerous times against a file cabinet. It just never happened. Really good detectives are born with a sixth sense, that crystal ball in the stomach, and I have the ability to get inside a person's soul. What do you think about that, Marty?
Knowing that he's been involved in, I think that we know about over a dozen wrongful conviction cases, I would question every single thing he said. He reminds me of, the detective who basically says, there's no camera on me, there's no person watching me, there are no rules that apply to me. I mean, last year we had 161 exonerations. Out of that, I believe 102 of them were as a result of police misconduct, prosecutorial misconduct, or some other government misconduct. That's a number that should scare the shit out of people, because if you think about 161 exonerations in 1 year, and that's based on the limited number of people who are doing this work, how many other innocent men and women are sitting in prison because of people like Scarcella?
And it's just a matter of breaking people down and then throwing them a life preserver where it's like, okay, you're feeling hopeless, you're feeling helpless. So now I'll tell me what I want to hear, and I'll get you out of this situation. The number one tool of the abuser is isolation. It's clearly abuse when they're doing that.
That's what I think Lamar Scott's confession 2 days later is so credible. It wasn't involved in it, had no law enforcement whatsoever. It was completely voluntary. He reached out to somebody because I think deep in his soul, he knew he could not allow Valentino to go to prison for a crime he committed. He didn't trust law enforcement, so what did he do? I guess back then, maybe the next best thing was go public and say, I did it. And the scariest thing is that when he was arrested again for another murder, I think he made some kind of statement along the lines is, had you listened to me way back when I said I committed this murder, I wouldn't have been able to commit this crime.
Yeah, of course. And Valentino, you had a bunch of eyewitnesses, which we know eyewitness testimony is often involved and not very reliable at all. But you had eyewitnesses that said you did it, even though you had somebody confessing. I'm really curious, and I think our listeners and viewers are curious about what you were saying at the time when the shooter was saying he did it and they were ignoring him and prosecuting you.
Well, Dr. Phil, I come from a very bad neighborhood, a lot of stuff going on there. And I had to ask myself, you know, was I in the twilight zone? You know, because up until now, I've been around a lot of people in the hood, as they would say, that do some awful things. I grew up with a lot of these people, but I never knew that these type of humans existed. Someone that would actually get on the stand and lie about a murder case. You know, it was later proved that they were coerced by the prosecution, you know. But also I had 8 witnesses that cleared me. So it was over 90 people that witnessed the shooting, Dr. Phil. So it was at a public restaurant. And, you know, you just can't ignore that type of evidence. 8 eyewitnesses. And I took a polygraph test and passed it.
Did this get to you emotionally? Were you angry? Were you depressed? Were you helpless? I mean, how did you feel?
Well, what happened was this, you know, it took me 7 years to get my focus and normalcy to a certain extent back. 7 years. And it wasn't until my uncle sent me some color pencils and some paper. And he says, hey, you know, if you can reclaim your talent, you can reclaim your life. You know, and I started drawing. And the drawing for the next 20 years is what kept me strong, what kept me going.
Art was important to you before this all happened, right?
Oh, yeah, I went to performing arts for art, you know, and, you know, I've been drawing since 4 years old. I won an art contest, you know, and, you know, but for 7 years, I hadn't drawn anything, painted anything. And it wasn't until my uncle sent me those supplies that my spirit started growing, you know, because prison's a place designed to break your spirit. And, you know, I took to the art again and it saved my life. I've always had a great spirit. I've always loved everybody. I get along with everybody. And prison didn't change that for me. I had my moments where I was bitter and angry and everything, but I can still wake up in the morning and smile and laugh, man. I'm not harping on that stuff. I'm just glad that I made it out. Too many of my friends didn't make it out. You know, some of them committed suicide.
Did you ever consider that?
Oh, yeah, man. At least once or twice a year, you know, but I knew that I had a bigger purpose, and that's what kept me going.
And what was your bigger purpose?
My bigger purpose was to make my family proud, to leave a legacy, you know, and to change the world in some small way. And I mean, I talk to kids now about making the right choices in the inner city. All of these kids going to prison where I come from, you know, and so for me, that's more fulfilling than anything in the world. And I was also there to help guys get their GED because I was one of the educated ones, you know, to help guys get their GED, you know, to counsel them about making the right choices upon being released. So, hey, I'm blessed, man. That's all I can say.